And what it is a puffy pancake that you bake in the oven. And if you've never made one before, you should really give it a try. It's a lot of fun to make with kids as well, because when it bakes into these puffy shapes in the oven, which is just a hoot to watch. And I'll have the recipe at the end of the video. But basically the ingredients you're going to need are eggs and milk and butter, flour, sugar, a little bit of vanilla and cinnamon, and I garnish it with some confectioner's sugar and some fresh lemon juice. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is cut 3 tablespoons of butter. And I'm going to put it in my pan, and I'm using this cast iron pan. I think it's about a 10-inch pan. And I'm just going to stick that in the oven. I've preheated my oven to 400 degrees. I'm going to put it in the oven to melt the butter. And this recipe is pretty easy because you can just remember threes. Most of the stuff is done in threes. Like we did 3 tablespoons of butter, now I'm going to do 3 eggs. And you want your eggs to be at least room temperature. And I'm just going to crack them into this little measuring cup just so I make sure I don't have any shell going into my blender, because I'm going to use a blender today. It kind of helps to make the pancake puffy. You can do this by hand, but I am going to use the blender today. So there's 3 eggs. Dump that into my blender. I'm just going to scrape it out so I get every drop. Okay. Now I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of milk. And when I measure my liquid ingredients, I like to get down right at eye level for the measuring, so it's nice and accurate. The next thing I'm going to add is my flour, and I'm using bread flour, and I'm going to sift the flour. Again, that adds to the puffiness. So I'm just going to use a little piece of wax paper. I have my sifter, and I'm going to use, it takes 3/4 of a cup, so I'm going to sift it right directly over my measuring cup. This is a 1/2 cup to start. And you don't have to do this step. It's kind of a fun thing to do with kids. They tend to like to sift things. And again, it does make it a little puffier. So we need a 1/4 cup more. So I'm just going to use what I just sifted and add that. So the reason I use the wax paper is because you can just easily put it right back into your flour container. Next, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. Now I'm just going to blend it on low. I'm going to give it a little scrape with my spatula. I'm going to blend it a little bit more. So my 3 tablespoons of butter are melted in my pan, so I'm just gonna kind of swirl it around to coat the sides. You do have to be careful with this because these cast iron pans are pretty heavy. You can also use a baking dish as well. Then I'm going to pour the excess butter right into my batter. And I'm going to give that a blend. I have my batter all completed. I'm going to pour it into my buttered pan. Okay, and I'm going to put it in the oven at 400 degrees for about 20 minutes. So hopefully you can see how it puffed up, and it does kind of deflate and flatten out when you bring it out of the heat of the oven. Now I'm going to add some juice of a fresh lemon. And the last thing I'm going to add is my powdered sugar. I'm just going to sift it on with the same sifter I used for the flour. That looks pretty good. And you can remove it and put it onto a serving plate or just cut it right in the pan, which is what I usually do. So you can see that it flattens down into a pancake, and it's a little custardy and a little sweet, and you can serve this for breakfast, brunch. I've even made it as an after-school snack. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.